Call to order the regular board meeting of the Directors of Butte Irrigation District, Wednesday, October 8th, 2025. I apologize for my voice this morning. Mr. Esslinger, would you please give me your invitation?
Please rise. Heavenly Father, we honor you and we thank you for this opportunity to put you first before this October board meeting ever begins. Father, we ask for your wisdom and guidance to direct this board of directors of Butte Irrigation District in every decision that comes before them on today's agenda. Father, we thank you for answer to prayer as you have provided rain in September and now in October, despite the looming drought. In our prayers to you today, we ask for an abundance of snow to fall in our watersheds this winter in order to fill our reservoirs for next year. We ask all of this in your mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Director Chris, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. I'm obviously a little under the weather today. It's a little foggy. I will try to keep things organized and on track. Madam? No. Introduction of guests that are present. Should start with Mr. Serrano.
Morning, Ryan Serrano with the New Mexico Legislative Commission. Alfred Perrell, Officer of the State Commissioner.
Earl Greer here for the Elton Butte Chamber of Commerce.
Bruce Swingle, Elton Butte Chamber of Commerce.
And from the model to Black Mountain Golf.
Good morning, Larry Vasquez, Reclamation, El Paso office.
Karen Byron, EBID.
Steve Hernandez, Carlsbad Irrigation District.
Thank you very much. I welcome our friends from Elton's Butte area, your seat. Would you please announce the guests we have online, Madam Secretary?
Certainly. Today online, we have Juan C. from EBID. We have Delise Maciel from EBID, James Narvaez from EBID, Dr. Phil King, consultant, Samantha Stifler, Cheryl Smith from OSC, and Sky DeVore, our lobbyist.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I welcome you all to our board meeting this month. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda which wish to be entered? Hearing no changes to the agenda, the agenda is approved. Item number 5, public input. This is a new item on our agenda. It is my intention to allow general public comment. The board will not be responding to these comments, but it's an opportunity for the public to address items of concern to the board. It will be limited to 3 minutes per participant, with no more than 30 minutes spent in this item monthly. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board? Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a brief update on NWRA. The annual conference is coming up, and I volunteered Josh, and he volunteered Mr. President and Mr. Rosa to participate on a panel talking about Texas versus New Mexico. We have a really good afternoon time slot of an hour. I have prepared a couple of PowerPoints for the introduction, but what I really wanted to get at was the district perspective of how the settlement is going to be implemented and what changes may come about, and then the farmer perspective on how they see the settlement impacting or not impacting, you know, what they do on a daily basis. So I think we're going to try to cover it all. A lot of interest in it. You know, they originally said, "How can you do this in an hour?" I said, "Got a lot of faith in the board and the manager to do that." So everybody's really looking forward to that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board with public comment? Hearing none, that brings us to the approval of the minutes for the board meeting of September 10th, 2025. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes.
Motion so made.
I have a motion by Director Glacial, seconded by Director Colquitt to approve the minutes for September 10th, 2025. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. That brings us to a presentation by Elephant Butte Chamber of Commerce. I have Mr. Swingle here as the presenter. Are you giving the presentation this morning, sir?
Yes, I think we're all gonna speak.
Very good. Do you have a presentation that we need the secretary to load for you? or-
No.
Very good. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Where would you like me to stand? Right here?
That's perfect. Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
my name is Bruce Swingle. I'm with the Elephant Butte Chamber of Commerce. With me is the president of Chamber of Commerce, Earl Greer, and a colleague of ours, James Prindamando with Pre-Real Investments. Want to thank you for the opportunity to come down here and speak to you all about this. This is a topic that's been, it surfaces every few years in this community. It has for at least the last 14, 15 years that I know of, and I'm sure many years before that. Just looking at your slogan, there's no strangers here, just friends who haven't met. I really appreciate that tone. Because particularly with us, we're here coming to talk to you about garnering your support in an effort that has been tried and tried and tried in this community. We're at a point now where we just can't stop with this. The water situation at Elephant Butte Lake and in southern New Mexico is, and I'm preaching to the choir here, you've forgotten more about water and water rights than what we will ever know. And it's not important that we understand the full dynamic of the water rights in New Mexico. But what we do see is we have an economy that's based in southern New Mexico based on this water. We know that we have an entire southern region of New Mexico who's been shorted water, historically. And we can't continue to let that happen. It's ironic that our effort to create a minimum pool at the lake and to kind of ensure that southern New Mexico gets the water rights that it deserves compared to the rest of the state of New Mexico. We started this initiative long before we realized the lake was going to be at 3.8% this year. Just so happens that it all coincided. The meetings we had set up, meet with the state engineer's office and others, it was very good timing for the alarm to be sounded. This is something this can has been kicked around the road for far too long. You're shorted on the water that you deserve, that you actually own. Southern New Mexico is being shorted. The lake is being impacted on an ongoing basis annually, virtually every year. Seems like we have a good year of water and this discussion stop. There's good water in the lake, everybody's happy, discussion stop. This is not something we can afford to have happen. Our economies are impacted, your economies are impacted, the state of New Mexico's. Elephant Butte State Park is by far the #1 recreation destination in New Mexico. The state has skin in the game, and having this discussion with the state engineer's office, the governor's office, they are very understanding of it. We have not always had this kind of relationship. We do believe that we have making very good inroads with the state engineer's office and looking at this problem. And frankly, the future of southern New Mexico depends on the collaboration of a lot of key players such as EBID, the chambers of commerce, the communities, the state parks. State parks has gotten on board. When we initially started this process, we wanted about 3.7 or 5.7% created as a minimum pool at the lake. State parks says, no, we have to have more than that. We need more than that to make the lake accessible, to ensure that the docks and the things and the boat ramps and things like that are usable. We need 4,310 elevation, but we have to have at that lake at a minimum So it's really brought a lot of partnerships going forward. And I'm hoping that EBID will be part of that partnership when we move forward with the state and the other stakeholders. Because I think we're all after the same thing. We don't want your water, we want water. When you look at the water that New Mexico and what we see in the Southwest, and Gary, appreciate your prayer today, talking about the water and it is our lifeline in southern New Mexico and New Mexico. But in Texas, when I put this document together, all reservoirs in Texas averaged 77.2% full capacity. This is in August. Today, they're probably 76 point something today. Cochiti Lake, 95% capacity. Navajo Lake, 73% capacity. Ute Lake, 45% capacity. Brantley Lake, 41% capacity. Elvada Lake, 19% capacity, and Alpha Butte was at 3.8% capacity when I put this together, a month ago. We bring this to the attention of the state engineer and said that the water management of the Rio Grande, from the time it hits the state line to the time it leaves New Mexico, you got some serious mismanagement going on. And they're very much aware of it. They're very supportive of it. She literally said, we can no longer kick the can down the road. Something has to happen. They've got to make some decisions. How the water is going to get into the Rio Grande from other areas, things of that nature, whether it's credits, debits, and all that other, that is way above my pay grade. That is the state engineer, and that's up to the experts to make those types of decisions. But the fact remains, we've got to have more water coming down the Rio Grande, and we got to be using it for the purposes that we need it for, particularly in southern New Mexico, whether that be for recreation, for economics, whether it be for agriculture. We have to have that. Now, refer to my colleagues if they have anything they would like to add.
Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate you welcoming us and allow us to talk to you and chat with you. I've got a lot of history here. I'm not one that's just moved in. I was raised at Winston. We had a farm in the Cachio Creek. I will confess to you that I was really happy when my uncle took over the farm and I didn't have to do the farm anymore. I'd rather dig post holes in the middle of July, quite frankly, than deal with snakes and hauling hay. And of course, we didn't have the stuff that you guys have now. When we mowed our hay, we had a mower, took it back to the barn, then we got a windrower and raked it, took that back to the barn, and then we got the baler and baled it. Of course, it fell on the ground, took that back to the barn, then we got the flatbed and we loaded it and then hauled that to the barn. So it's a lot different now than it was then, and I was glad when my uncle took over the farm. My dad was a county commissioner in 67, 68, 69, 70, and established a permanent pool at the time by negotiating an agreement with the city of Albuquerque on water rights. And it was a 50,000 acre foot. I don't know if you remember that or not, Gary. There's a 50,000 acre foot permanent pool negotiated out because it was so bad at that point in time. That was the history that I've been told. My uncle told me in 54, before my time, that it was nothing but a channel at that point. It was nothing but a river going through there. Well, in 69 was the second worst that it's ever been. And since then, of course, we've seen it go over the spillway. What they didn't understand at the time, and what we're working to try to make sure it doesn't happen again, was when they negotiated on the water rights, the lawyers didn't understand the compact well enough, didn't draft the language well enough, so that when it did go over the spillway, what was the first water that went over the spillway? The 50,000 acre feet. That was gone. So at that point in time, there was nothing else that maintained any kind of a pool in the lake. We've taken just a little bit of a different approach because we've been told by individuals, elected individuals, not to bother them with economics or agriculture. So we're looking at it more from an environmental standpoint, and we present it in that way. And as Bruce said, the state engineer and the state recognized from an economic impact for the state itself, the GRTs that come in, that it is a viable option for them to ensure that the lake's existence continues. With that, we're hoping, and our desire is that EBID benefit from it and we benefit from it. And that's why we're here, to create this partnership, if you will, that we're working together. You always get more when there's more numbers involved than you do if it's just one or two entities and that's all there is. And so we're here, hat in hand, looking to shake hands and see if we can't get something going together and see if we can't make things happen that will benefit southern New Mexico, as Bruce said. James?
Thank you, Earl, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to speak this morning. First, I just wanted to be clear, you know, we're not the enemy. We have a growing coalition of vested, really well-capitalized and organized stakeholders up in the Butte that are interested in the same thing you guys are interested in. For decades now, everyone has endured shortages. Back in 2013, we hit a record low with 3% capacity, crippling allotments to half an acre foot or less, far below what was entitled. As of August 2025, we were again below 4%. And with the historic shortages, collectively, everyone has suffered: incomplete deliveries, failed crops, failing businesses, struggling economies, and difficult choices. A full reservoir isn't a threat, it's our shared lifeline. It ensures reliable flows for New Mexico, Texas, and beyond under the compact. And while low snowpack and drought have undeniably contributed, leaving the reservoir under 25% for years, it's not the full story. Poor or mismanagement north of the dam exacerbates the losses, with seepage, evaporation, and invasive siphoning up to 67% more than necessary in key reaches. Salt cedars, an invasive species that guzzles and blankets the riverbanks, absorbs millions of acre feet annually. While removal projects have cleared acres as recent as this last year, much more has to be done. And the fix is pretty clear. If we organize and execute on these proven capital projects, the low flow conveyance channel has already slashed seepage by consolidating flows and reducing hydraulic gradient to the groundwater. Concrete linings and the solar panels, like the ongoing Montoya laterals in phase 3, prevents porous losses and boosts delivery up to 20%. Scaling the aforementioned salt cedar eradication piloted successfully in the Middle Rio Grande would also salvage significant amounts of water. And there's a number of actionable steps that are under our control. Some of them are funded, many more should be funded through federal reclamation and state programs. I think what we wanted to convey today is, you know, together we win. If we're divided and have different interests, it's easier for us to not be organized and put the pressure on that we think is really necessary to get this fixed. We wanted to come just to say we're working on a white paper with a really organized group to help unite the masses, organize and pressure the electeds to fund and deploy the projects now. As Bruce had mentioned earlier, as the levels, you know, fluctuate and tend to on the rise, people kind of put the project down and don't revisit it again, but we can't afford to do that anymore. We feel like funding and deploying these projects now in conjunction with the modernized compact helps us all to deliver the results that we all deserve. I personally, and the group we're putting together, is willing to bring time, talent, and treasure in any way that we can to help. And it's time we feel that we prioritize delivery over division. And of course, a stronger Rio Grande starts with all of us rowing in the same direction. So I appreciate the time to speak today.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful for you to come to our board meeting today and present that. I'd like to start with, are there questions from the board? From our friends at Elton Butte? Director Glacial.
We all talked reclamation. What I was told was the whole, the breach of low flow channel costs 20,000 acre feet a year. They have not been very willing to plug that hole, so I'll talk to them. Good, if you can give us some help. New Mexico currently owes Compact Texas, which sadly includes us, 100,000 acre feet of water. If I'm mistaken, correct me.
It's north of that, you're correct.
And that would help.
Thank you, Director Glacial. Director Colbert, you had a question?
Right now, the elevation of the lake's at 4310, is that correct? And you need it at what elevation? No, you need it at 4310.
The state parks recommended, because the amount of water we were interested in was about 5.7%.
Okay.
At a minimum number. that is 4,300 feet. State Parks came in and said, we gotta have a minimum of 4,310 to accommodate all of the ramps, and docks, keep the docks where they're safe and allow all of the ramps to be used in the lake.
And just,
What's the elevation now?
just to add to that, just so you know, there's one other factor that for the reason that they're asking that water be at a higher elevation, there's a number of archaeological sites. When the water's at that elevation, it covers the archaeological sites, which sustains them and supports them and keeps people from damaging them. So that, you know, as we go to certain elected officials, that's kind of an important point that they want to hear about, rather than some of the other things that we've approached them about. I apologize for interrupting,
Yeah,
but I
no,
wanted
no,
to add that point there.
Sure. And what's the elevation right now?
I can't tell you that, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I suspect,
It's south of 4,300.
Okay.
I think we've got some experts on the dinner meeting today. Well, we can get the answers to those, but those are good questions, Director. Got the questions for the board. So we have some friends from Reclamation, from the OSC and from the ISC. I just wanna, I'm not asking you to comment, but I want to give you space to provide comment if you'd like. Hearing none. I'm sorry, Mr. Hernandez.
Well, I have, not Reclamation or ISC, but, a similar proposal has been floated by the United States in the Carlsbad project. The United States is looking for water to support the Butte Shiner and its habitat. The position of the board is that, as long as it's imported water, it cannot be project supply at all that's taken to form the pool, that the board would consider a pending application before the Interstate Stream Commission and the OSC to create a pool for the Butte Shiner use by the United States. But once again, the caveat is that cannot be any project supply. It has to be imported water. The board would have to see where that water's coming from. But a similar proposal on the papers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernandez. First, I did want to express how much I appreciate you taking the time to come and present to us today. And I especially appreciated the comment of, we will get further in the Rio Grande when we're all rowing together. That's a sentiment I expressed many times in many arenas. I also appreciate the state engineer's position that we all need a lake at Elton Butte. That is a very, very true statement. So, in looking for solutions over the years, there is the simple equation that the amount of water in Elton Butte depends on what flows in and what flows out. That's a pretty simple equation. If we look at the what flows out component, what things do we have to do there in order to alter that? Well, we would need agreement from two different irrigation districts, which are signatory to the reclamation contracts. We would need agreement from two different states, which are signatories to the Rio Grande Compact. And we would need agreement from two different nations, which are signatories to the 1906 treaty. And it's just an incredibly difficult lift. It's really hard to find a reason why it is in the interest of the Republic of Mexico to leave their water in Elton. It's hard to find a reason for that, let alone Texas and our sister district. Looking at the water that's coming in, it was mentioned that New Mexico is looking for solutions for their delivery shortfalls. I believe that New Mexico would like to have a large amount of credit water in Elton Butte. I believe them when they say that. They are struggling to figure out how to make that happen. We've discussed the difficulties with the low flow conveyance channel, both for using it to get water to Elton Butte when the flows in the river are low, as well as issues we have of losses from that conveyance channel. Finding ways to partner with the United States to resolve those issues is also a very good start. One of the questions I'm going to ask Dr. King Mr. Vasquez, you might know, what's the quantity of water in Elephant Butte at 4310 elevation? Also knows,
Sir, I wouldn't know that.
that's fine. Dr. King, do you happen to know the quantity of water in Elephant Butte at an elevation of 4310?
Well, yes, I do. Thank you for asking. It's about 178,000 acre feet.
So, solutions on the inflow side, New Mexico could have a credit of 178,000 acre feet of water that's in Elephant Butte. There could be a quantity of water that is not native Rio Grande water to the tune of 178,000 acre feet of water. Neither of those are releasable by the project. The Republic of Mexico has no interest in that water, and so therefore there's not an issue with not releasing it. That's a pretty large quantity of water. And then, of course, we run into the issue described, which is at some point, the reservoir will spill. I have faith in it. I count on that. I can't tell you when it'll happen. I just feel fairly strongly certain that we couldn't prevent it even if we tried. At which point you have to do all this over again, because all credit waters spill when the reservoir spills. Finding a way that you have water in the reservoir that doesn't spill requires actually acquiring part of the capacity of the reservoir, which would be wildly expensive, possibly in the billions of dollars. But I believe that we can find ways to, yes, that that satisfy all of those various requirements. But it will take all of us rowing together. There will not be a solution that is both cheap and easy. It will require complex and difficult solutions, and will likely require a significant amount of funding. I appreciate you highlighting the benefits to the state of New Mexico of Elephant Butte Lake. Water in the lake at Elephant Butte benefits all of the citizens of New Mexico. Finding ways that people can equitably contribute to the benefits they receive from the reservoir is a matter for our legislature to try to discern, try to fund, and of course, ultimately, we will probably need some amount of legislative policy in order to accomplish these things. We are not opposed to having water in the reservoir to support the economy's development view and support the things that you've highlighted in the documents that you presented to us. Our bottom line is, it's the inflow side of it. As difficult as it is to solve it on that side, it is far simpler than solving it on the outflow side. Any other comments or questions from the board? Director Fleischer.
So, Director Loving and I attend this coalition of Rio Grande water users last week in Santa Fe. First presenter is named Ryan Richter. He wrote a book, which Mr. Esslinger picked up, kind of loaned it to me. I've not read the book yet. Seemed like he's really very well informed. They had a pie chart up there, uses of water in the Rio Grande. Riparian takes more than agriculture. I was shocked. So what they alluded to, getting rid of salt cedar would help a lot. That's easier said than done, I know that, but that's a major user of water on this river, major.
Thank you, Director Fleischer. You had what was listed as a petition in your documents. At the risk of being overly critical of it, I had some questions on it that I hope will help you in improving your communication on this. It talked about a minimum pool being useful for a reduction in sedimentation, and I didn't quite understand how that would work. Do you have any comment on how
So if I can, I think if we could respectfully request a working group come of this, there's many team members that contribute different pieces of information. There's a lot of research that has been done. Oftentimes you can have two super talented groups researching the same thing and come out to a different conclusion, which can be really productive also, because you learn from both sides. But I think the overwhelming sentiment that's growing, and part of the genesis, I would imagine, of the petition is when you organize voices, you start to get the attention that's required. And I think that was the first step. And we wanted to come here to say, we're all in the same boat, you know, with little water left to float in. And we feel like if there's a working group, we don't want to be perceived as a voice that is disconnected from this group, right? We've done a lot of work personally in Washington, very well aware of the lobbying and the camps and all of the politics that go behind it. And I think a unified voice is super, super important. If there's any way we can have a working group or something that comes of this where we can share information back and forth and come up with that kind of concise voice, which of course is led by you all here on the board, that would be really productive. I think there's some additional resources we can bring to bear to help answer those specific questions. I wouldn't dare answer something at that level without the right folks next to me, but we can bring those folks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that comment. It's well taken. We have a water resources committee on this board. If you would provide some contact information for what your working group is, to Mr. Smith, the water resources committee will reach out to them and see if they can start working on coordinating some discussions. Mr. President. Director Glacial.
One more comment. 43% of water discharge out of that goes to Texas. We're in the middle of trying to settle their lawsuit right now, so they're a big player in this also.
Thank you, Director Glacial. Any final comments before we move on to our next item? Once again, please, Mr. Swinton.
Just want to thank you for your time today. Thank all of you. Thank you all. Just FYI, one thing I think we can bring on board too is I'm on the BLM Resource Advisory Committee, and so we have talked about the sedimentation that's coming from the creeks into the river, into the channel, and what needs to be to clean that up. I think we need to look at that on both sides of the dam. So I think we can bring them into this discussion as well. In fact, I will bring them into this discussion as well.
Thank you very much. We would very much like it if BLM kept their center.
Yep.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is committee report, the land use committee, and I'd like to open it with a comment. Ms. Colquitt, I appreciate how active the committee has been, and things you have to present here today.
Really, I tell you, the workhorse is David. God, he's incredible to work with. But yes, the land use committee's been fairly active, or proactive, trying to address some of the concerns with the certain land. With that, I'm gonna pass it over to David though, to take over, but I'll be here for whatever Mr. questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Director Colquitt. The Land Use Committee met twice, since our last board meeting. We met once on September 9th, as the committee report indicates, to talk about, the status of the moratorium and amendments to, the proposed, land relinquishment policy. And also to take an initial look at second amended memorandum of understanding draft with the city of Las Cruces. We then met again the next week. At that meeting, we had a quorum of the committee. Director Colquitt and Director Chris were there. We were able to approve to bring to this board proposed amendments to the land relinquishment policy and provide a draft to the city of Las Cruces to review. We'll let the board know the city of Las Cruces has actually not responded yet with comments, and that may affect how this board approaches the draft that's on the agenda today, knowing that we haven't heard from the city of Las Cruces yet. with that, I think the remainder of the substance of it can be addressed in the following agenda items that address the things we looked at as having.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luce. Mr. Colquitt, do you have anything to follow up on the land use committee report?
Not at the moment, but, it would be good to discuss the trails of the city of Las Cruces MOU. So we'll get to that as, I guess we pick all this apart. My question for you, Mr. President, what would you like to cover next, or what would you like us to do?
I'll take in the order of the agenda. We'll discuss the, if you're finished with the committee report, we'll move on to discussing the relinquishment policy.
I have nothing more. David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colquitt. That brings us to item number, excuse me, brings us to item number 9, discussion and approval of policy 1997-ENG 10, relinquishment of EBID property and interests. Mr. Smith.
I too will defer to Mr. Lutz.
And,
Mr. Luce.
thank you, Mr. Chair. In the packet, we have a clean and a red line copy. In terms of the red lines, since our last discussion on these proposed amendments, we did determine, thanks to Maryland's hard work, kind of looking historically, that there were some amendments passed in November of 2019, so that date is indicated. In terms of the initial consideration phase, when the board has something before it that staff has felt meets the basic criteria, is arguably something the board would consider. The proposal of the land use committee is to publish it on the EBID website so that the general public can review the potential relinquishment at issue. And also, if there is an EBID constituent that has adjacent property, provide direct specific notice by way of the address that's on file with EBID to that constituent landowner, so that if they wanted to make a presentation or make an offer of that constituent's own, they could. That would satisfy both the desire to have a specific focus on EBID constituents, but also have the general public aware of what is happening for transparency's sake. So that is the way the land use committee has sought to address the concerns that were brought at the last meeting. Those are the red lines that are before in terms of the proposed amendments. The next agenda item, of course, discusses the status of the moratorium. In looking at minutes from past meetings.
Mr. Luce, just as a point of order.
Yeah, I don't want to.
We'll discuss it next.
Yeah,
I want to stay focused on the relinquishment
Understood.
policy.
thank you.
You have the relinquishment policy, both in a clean version and a red line version in your board packet. I have a few questions, but before I ask those, are there other questions from the board members on the proposed amendments to the relinquishment policy? Seeing none, I'm the last of mine. My first is in process for initial consideration for the board. We still have the, see if I can find it, the criteria. The basis of the board of directors' decision will be whether the property no longer serves any EBID purpose and whether relinquishment is in the best interest of EBID. We have also a definition here that says that it has to be excess real property. What amount of determination do you think the board of directors needs to make in this, in discussing whether or not this is actually excess real property?
Well, I think the exhibit provides examples, and I think the board would have a discussion as it would in the context of any meeting, particularly if there are differences of opinion as to whether it's considered excess real property or not, so that it's reflected in the public record.
The standard for staff is that it could arguably be considered. I generally call that the Google factor. It's past the Google factor. You're asking to buy our headquarters, that kind of question.
That's a good way to put it.
It's a pretty low standard that staff has to clear that through. And so I'm wondering, there an elevated amount of scrutiny for the board? Or is it simply sufficient for the board to ask staff if it meets the definition of excess real property?
I think that's up to the board. I mean, as long as staff understands that the standard for arguably is different than answering the question from the board, does the staff consider it to be excess real property or not?
Okay.
Because as you say, arguably is meant to be, and that was a good way to put it, a giggle factor. That the approach should be that staff should present almost anything that it thinks the board would consider, even if it's predicted the board would decline it. It meets the criteria, it should come before the board. But then if the board turns and asks the staff, okay, it's meant to arguably standard, but what do you really think? Is this excess real property? Is this something that EBID is going to need presently in use, or even not in use now, may be needed for the future? Give us an honest assessment of that. I would hope that's the way this is implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Before I move on to my next question, are there any other comments from the board specifically about decision criteria for the board in the initial consideration process? Seeing none. I only have two, I almost forgot the second. We have a process for noticing that we received a request for initial consideration for relinquishment of property. To get to that point, I believe the applicant or the requester has to submit a non-refundable $1,000 fee to cover the cost of doing this. I'm not real clear what we do if we get responses from the public. They are also interested. My first question would be, do they also have to pay this $1,000 fee for their interest to be considered?
If they're making a formal offer in response to the notice received, my belief would be yes.
Thank you. And I was also unclear about if we have more than one offer, how do we resolve that at initial consideration?
I think if you have multiple offers, probably be agended. And you would consider each one separately on its own merits, but understanding that there are other offers.
Thank you, that's quite clear. I'm sorry, did you? Okay.
I have a comment.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in real estate, we deal with multiple offers all the time. There is a process for that. Essentially, we would notify everyone that there are multiple offers and they need to bring their best and final offer to the board. And then the board will address those.
Mr. Franzoy.
My understanding is that those best and final offers would be sealed until opened at that event, right?
Should be. So the initial consideration is just whether the board will even consider relinquishing this. And then it's at the final consideration that we review the appraisals and decide whether or not we'll accept the offered value. Is it the final consideration that we would do the sealed bid consideration? Does the policy accurately state that?
I would say that's not entirely clear. I would say the final consideration is the area when the final price is considered, because at that point, you've had your survey, you've had your appraisal, you've had potentially as applicable DFA approval. So it's understood that that's when EBID would finally agree to the price.
Given that there's been a lot of work on this policy, I'm ready to approve it. And well, I brought up something that I was confused in reading the policy. I also don't actually know exactly how that would play out, or if it even ever would. And I'm generally hesitant to try to guess what the future will bring in setting a policy today. Instead, set a policy for what has occurred. And currently, what has occurred is we don't have multiple offers on these policies. That said, I would ask the board, Mr. Smith, Mr. Lutz. Do you think we should try to improve the clarity on what we will do if there are multiple offers before approving this policy? Mr. Smith.
I believe I asked Mr. Esslinger, last time we discussed this, if we'd ever had multiple offers to his recollection. He said no. So my recommendation would be, let's adopt a policy, so we have a policy on the books. And we can adopt an amendment or a separate policy for the event of multiple offers. And my thought would be, we can essentially copy from the New Mexico Real Estate Commission how you deal with multiple offers and make that a policy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
I don't know, if Mr. Lutz has some thoughts.
My thought is the way this policy is drafted, I would be surprised if multiple offerors, if the board granted more than one offeror past the initial consideration to where they'd have to do that work. I believe this board would probably indicate a preference for one over the other at the initial consideration phase, but I'm not the board, obviously. I would be surprised if we ran into the situation where we had multiple offers at a final consideration stage, just because of the amount of expense that goes into the survey appraisal, the time of DFA approval. That would be my opinion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. And that, thinking it through. Generally speaking, this board has favored considerations where it's the adjacent property that is requesting the,
I'm doing well, Jen. How about you?
thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Whereas the adjacent property that's requesting the relinquishment, usually to remedy some problem with a shift in our right of way line. Or some other, odd deficiency that has occurred due to how the project was constructed. If you have two offerers, obviously one of them, at least one of them is not going to be adjacent. So how do you resolve that? I appreciate the comments from Mr. Smith, Mr. Lucas. I concur that really solving the details of that, we're unlikely to be successful in solving them today, and I'm not trying to delay improving this policy to address that. Even though reading it as a governor, I wasn't sure what to do if we had two offers. Other comments from the board? Or questions? Ms. Colquitt.
To approve this, but including what Josh thought of maybe a second memorandum of understanding. Is that what we do? Make a motion with the intent to follow up?
I'm gonna let Mr. Smith speak for himself. My understanding of Mr. Smith's comment was that it became an issue in the future.
Okay.
We would review the governing guidance that he described and somehow integrated into our policy. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. My thought would be we approve this policy,
Yes,
just approve it,
yes.
and then the land use committee can address creating a separate policy for multiple offers. We don't need to do that today,
Okay,
and we won't wait till it actually arises, but
to approve this, yes, okay.
no, I mean, to draft that,
Yes.
we'll work on that.
Okay, good, yeah, okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
If all is done, I would like to make a motion to approve 1997 ENG's new edition.
Thank you very much. There's a motion on the floor to approve the amendment to policy 1997 ENG 10. Seconded by Director Roverosa. Motion made by Director Colquitt. Discussion. I'm in favor of approving this amendment.
we'll hop on that other deal, if you will. It's just easier getting tons.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of, the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Policy 1997 ENG 10 is amended as presented. Brings us to item 10, clarification regarding status of moratorium on land transfers and potential approval to confirm and or lift any moratorium on land transfers. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we were looking at this, Marilyn delved into past minutes. She and David have worked on this pretty diligently. We have discovered there's potential record of the moratorium having been lifted in 2021, I believe, and correspondence to that effect. So again, I will defer to David. He has the actual information.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz.
So in November of 2019, I'd like to thank Marilyn for her work in looking through those minutes. There were amendments passed to the relinquishment of EBID property interests. There is, at least as reflected in the minutes, a motion to lift the moratorium that was passed by the board. There was one specific property relinquishment on the agenda at that time. And I know in speaking to you, President Davier, just before the last board meeting, there is a question of historical knowledge as to whether that was meant to be a partial lifting of the moratorium for that specific transfer. Maryland worked further between board meetings and found another relinquishment in 2021. I would just say this, I understand that the general belief of this group has been that there is a moratorium in place. There is certainly an argument to be made that it was only partially lifted for that transaction. But in looking at the minutes objectively, the minutes are the historical record of this organization. I would say from an objective standpoint, I would believe that the moratorium was lifted. I don't know if that question needs to be definitively answered. Because the way I tried to craft the agenda item was, you have the ability today to just determine, okay, we're going to confirm a moratorium is in place, as has been indicated to numerous people over the years, or decide to lift it. I would just bring up the point that it would appear that it was lifted in 2019.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. So I will comment that I was present at the meeting in 2019. I believe I made the motion. I remember the land use issue in question. I would not have recalled that we had to lift the moratorium to do that, but it is clearly stated in the minutes. I will also note that I read the minutes, I read those minutes, I voted to approve those minutes, my signature is on those minutes. And I believe they at the time, a month later, I believe they accurately reflected what was discussed at the meeting. And as Mr. Lutz said, there's a reason we write these things down, because it is more accurate than my human memory. There was also, I remember the additional land use issue we were considering in 2021. That said, I appreciate the structure that Mr. Smith and his team have put together in creating resolutions for these policies of the board that haven't yet been formalized in one of our formal policies, to help us keep track of them, as opposed to having to dig through minutes and try to figure out exactly what we meant in the oral discussion of something when we make a motion and take action. I think it is highly appropriate that we have a resolution today, and then we're taking affirmative action to lift the moratorium, if that's the will of the board. And so I support either adopting or denying the motion, as is the will of the board, in order to fully clarify that. I will also mention that I'm in favor of adopting the resolution. Because the principal underlying issues that we've been waiting to get through in the relinquishment policy have been addressed by the land use committee. So, I think it is appropriate for us to lift the moratorium so that we can continue considering the relinquishment of excess property. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, let's will of the board.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution to lift the moratorium.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt to approve resolution 2025-11, lifting the moratorium on land use to the relinquishment of excess property. Seconded by Director Roverosa, and if you'll give me just a moment, I want to bring that up and make sure that it's clearly stated on the record here what that resolution is. All right, take me just a moment, Mike. Electronic to catch up. Thank you. I can tap a blank page 15 to get there.
The title of the resolution is moratorium on conveyance of district property.
Ignoring the recitals. It says the moratorium on the conveyance, sale, and transfer of district property approved by the board of directors of the district is hereby lifted and terminated. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor of resolution 2025-11, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Brings us to item number 11, the potential approval of a second amended memorandum of understanding between Butte Irrigation District and City of Las Cruces for the use of district drains, canals, and laterals as multi-use, non-motorized pathways. Mr. Smith. Director Colquitt.
And I believe this is where, David said the city of Las Cruces has not responded to, I guess our, would you call proposed changes? And but so therefore, maybe I'm stepping, talking out of school, but I think we should hear back from Las Cruces before we proceed with this second MOU. That's,
Are you asking me to postpone this agenda item?
I don't know. Maybe we should,
Mr. Smith.
I suggest we hear from Mr. Lutz.
You Director Colquitt?
yes, yeah,
Mr. Lutz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Director Colquitt. So we are currently working, as the board knows from past meetings, there was an expiration of an MOU in place that had been amended once to extend with the city of Las Cruces regarding use of district drains, canals, and laterals. Specifically, there is a project that the city of Las Cruces is working on around the convention center area that involves EBID property that is ongoing, for which most specifically having a memorandum of understanding in place is pretty much essential. I think both sides believe that. What we did as the land use committee is, since the initial memorandum of understanding was entered with the city, we had a memorandum of understanding with the county as to the Vado Trail area last year that had a few years of working with the city version from which it was used as a template. We reviewed that, saw little areas that we felt were improvement, and incorporated those as revisions into this proposed second amended memorandum of understanding. That has been sent to the city, specifically the Parks and Recreations manager, and also city legal is going to review it. They just have not gotten back to us yet. The one area of note that I think is worth to highlight to the board is the recommendation of the land use committee is not to waive land use fees by the city of Las Cruces, which would be a change. Arguments pro and con. The argument for waiving the fees would be is that through this memorandum, the city is maintaining the property anyway. and spending those money to where EBID does not have that expense to maintain it. The argument that I believe the land use committee felt is that it is not an agricultural use of the property. I don't have an opinion on that. That's a policy decision, but it's something that, and I don't know what the city's opinion is going to be on that, but I think it's something worth highlighting as the board reviews it. But I think I would agree with Director Colquitt. I don't think there's anything to pass until we've really heard from the city as to what their comments might be. And it may be worthwhile to table this item until we hear more from the city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lutz. I think there may be some utility in this board expressing its opinion on the changes that were suggested and whether or not this board supports the changes that were suggested and communicating that with the city. I said it comes up to the board whether or not we discuss this further or whether we simply postpone it to a future meeting. Director Colquitt.
So it was the land use committee's, I guess, collective thought that, yes, since the city of Las Cruces is not a agricultural entity or any of that, or they're not using that land for ag uses, like David said, that we should charge it. I was wondering what the rest of the board felt like on that matter. And Smith, Josh, sorry.
Comments from comments or questions from the board specifically regarding the charging of land use fees to the city of Las Cruces. It's my opinion they should be charged. My opinion, everyone should be charged for using the resources of the district. I've stated on multiple occasions, I'm not in favor of the ag exemption. If you are receiving benefit from the use of district facilities, you should pay for those benefits. Just because you were a member does not mean the other members should subsidize the benefits of your use. That is my opinion. And the city of Las Cruces would be the same. We probably need to consider how the benefit of maintenance to the district mitigates those fees. In what way do we express fees that are still needed? But if they're providing a benefit to the district, that the fee should appropriately recognize that is my point. I am not in favor of waiving use fees for the use of district facilities. The only use that of district facilities is conveyance of water to our members, the return of water to the system. Those are the uses that don't require a fee. Those are the mandates of the district and why the district has those facilities, why the district approves those facilities, and why our members have paid for those facilities. Other comments? Director Ludwig.
If Las Cruces pays the fee, does that mean EBID has to maintain?
Not necessarily. The most, like I would suggest probably all of our, most of our licenses have a requirement that the licensee maintains whatever portion of district infrastructure that they have a permit for. They still pay a fee. There are obvious things like if you have a underground crossing, what are you maintaining? If you have a culverted crossing, you're expected to maintain some portion above and below your culvert. Mr. Lutz.
And Mr. Chair, I might make one comment just specifically as to the city of Las Cruces that I think it's important to consider. Is that the city of Las Cruces is expected, as all municipalities are, and it's set forth in law, that if utilities are using city property, a franchise fee is to be charged and assessed. It is a percentage. It's fairly regulated. But for any utility, it is then passed on to the customers of the city of Las Cruces. So the city charges for use of its property in terms of utilities or otherwise by law. It's expected. So I may talk with legal about this more in depth, but there is an argument that you're just doing something that the city would do to anyone else.
There is a suggestion that by not doing it, we are violating the anti-donation clause of the Constitution of New Mexico. That we are donating benefit from one entity to another.
I would say, Mr. Chair.
Oh, dang it.
I would say that because they are maintaining the property as part of the memorandum of understanding, that there is a benefit that's wrapped up into the agreement as a whole to where there would not be an anti-donation issue.
So there's no legal basis to my position. Thank you very much. No, I always do appreciate the clarifications and their willingness to clarify my positions to help me improve my positions. I think it's important that we are not. The infrastructure of our district is the single largest asset of this district. Therefore, the benefits of using it should flow to our members, not to the individual beneficiaries of that use. I think that's important. Director Clayshall.
I mean, how much maintenance is there to do on this?
Well, if they're putting it, I mean, a lot.
When it makes all the leaves.
Yeah, I mean, we put a lot of maintenance into our infrastructure, so I can't put dollar signs on it. What I can tell you is the single largest component of our budget is the maintenance of our infrastructure.
To me, their job of maintaining is to their advantage as much as ours.
And that's certainly something to consider when we're trying to figure out what reasonable usage fees are.
You know, I'm with, Mr. Lutz, is city charge a franchise fee. I see it on my bills all the time. We're just telling we're doing the same thing in accordance with your own policy.
Thank you, Director Clayshall. Director Rosa.
I too am in favor of charging the city for licensing fees, and I agree that we should be charging everybody for licensing. So I don't think that the entire community should subsidize any one farmer that's putting in that's using EBID property. But I think we can discuss that later.
Director Colquitt.
Is there any other thoughts, questions, concerns from y'all the land use committee would, could, should change?
So I didn't have any recommended changes to the proposed amendments to the MOU. There did seem to be a clarification about single bank use on high collateral. And I didn't quite understand that or understand the reason for that. That is a question I have.
So, the only point that was made by staff is that this area is actually piped. So they wanted me to include some language because it's only the city use should only be allowed on one side. It is a single bank memorandum of understanding. That goes back to the beginning. And the idea is that EBID would have its regular access ways on the other side of the bank, per its usual expectations if it needed to do any kind of maintenance of its own. And they wanted me to just add some language because of that, to make sure that the city coordinates with staff in terms of what they're doing to make sure they're only staying on one side.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. And I would suggest it's not just maintenance, but operations. This, even when the lateral's piped, there's still operations that are required.
Thank you. That's a good clarification.
those are the two things that caught my eye. Yeah, there were some minor corrections, things, but were there any other substantive changes you'd like to highlight, please?
Not really, they would only be changes that the board already considered worthy of approval last year for the county on the auto trails. Definition of freeboard was, I think, something we added, just technical items of that variety. I think the question before the board would be whether to wait to hear from the city of Las Cruces before really. I mean, you can't approve a memorandum without the other contracting party being ready to sign all of it.
So are there any concerns with any of the proposed amendments? Given that, I do agree that it seems appropriate to wait to hear back from the city so that we're not approving an amendment and then having a new amendment come before us. However, what is the will of the board?
I move the table, the MOU until the board meeting on
November 12th. I have a motion from Director Rover to postpone the approval of this second amended memorandum until the November board meeting. Seconded by Director Colquitt.
Should City of Las Cruces not get back to us, then we'll just revisit it and kick it on down the line again.
The board would make a decision about what to do. If we've not heard back from the city of Las Cruces in November. The board will make a decision in November about how to take action. Director Fleischer.
This is a comment, and I'm in favor of this resolution. I talked to Chris O'Gean today, he's very frustrated because they want to get started on it because he's got another big project coming out of it. He said, we need to keep going, and I understand that, I appreciate it. Nonetheless, until the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed, I'm not in favor of doing anything.
So I have, for the record, I have heard there is at least some subset of the board that is prepared to approve this amendment once the city takes action, so that can be conveyed to the city. Motion on the floor is whether or not to postpone. Any further questions or any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it, motion passes. Agenda item 11 is postponed to the November board meeting. That brings us to staff reports. The first one being water resources. Good morning, Dr. King.
Good morning, Mr. President. Are you all seeing my presentation and hearing me okay? Okay. Okay, well, in summary, we didn't get any miraculous precipitation between last meeting and this meeting, being as our normal irrigation season is drawn a month closer and still no miraculous fix. Things are a little more dire. This is the storage that we have in Elephant Butte right now. And by the way, the folks from Elephant Butte, I did have a few statistics from what they were talking about there. If you don't mind, I'll share those real quick. The storage in Elephant Butte right now is about 71,000 acre feet, which corresponds to a pool elevation of 4291. So it's pretty well below what they're looking for. As I mentioned, that 4310 target that they were discussing is about 178,000 acre feet of storage. If they lowered that to 4,300, it would be 115,000. So this is one of the things that in trying to develop some sort of a plan for storing water in Elephant Butte Reservoir will need to address, and that is a little bit of elevation, takes a whole bunch of water. And it's nonlinear. I think this could be a very good little optimization plan to wrap that up. The 50,000 acre feet that they were talking about, the pool that they had until the last reservoir spill, that 50,000 acre feet would correspond to a reservoir elevation of 4284. So very well below their target of 4310. We've got about 15,000 in Caballo for a total of 86,000. 7,200 acre feet of San Juan, of Rio Grande compact credit water for Colorado. Last I heard, about 4,300 acre feet of San Juan Chama water. Subtracting those out leaves us with usable storage of 75,000 or so. Not releasable, that corresponds to a minimum pool at Elephant Butte of 10,000 acre feet, 12,000 acre feet for Caballo, and 10,000 acre feet of evaporation. But the minimum pool at Elephant Butte includes the compact credit and San Juan Chama water. That leaves us with a seasonal supply of 54,000 acre feet. Now, to put this in perspective, at 54,000 acre feet of release, the D1 curve gives you 0, or it's actually negative. In fact, D1 goes to 0 at 124,000 acre feet. So anything less than 124,000 acre feet, we take as 0, and we're a long ways from that. Even the D2 curve goes to 0 at 67,000 acre feet. So we're below the zeros on both of our allocation functions that we use for allocation. We are getting about 300 acre feet per day in right now. That is fading, but I think it's going to get a little boost here in a day or two, as there is a big spike coming down from, last I looked at Santa Casia, it was running about 2,000 CFS from a storm that blew through yesterday. These are the river gauges, and at Otoe, just downstream of the confluence of Rio Chama and Rio Grande, you'll see that it is generally, well, it's well below the median, but it is also dropping off it's down to about 200 CFS as of yesterday. The Rio Grande at Albuquerque, this is the 0 line here. You see that it has been running at 0 with occasional spikes from monsoonal events hitting and creating a little spike. And at San Marcial, we're spending even more time at 0, going all the way back into April. The river began drying there with these occasional little bursts. We did have this one that went through late September, at the very end of September and into early October. That spike brought about 4,000 or 5,000 acre feet into the reservoir in a few days there. It hasn't quite gone to 0, as you saw by the 300 acre feet per day of inflow. So, but it will get back down there. Again, we've got another spike working its way down, and that's a good thing, but it just isn't very much water. This is kind of, I suppose you can think of this as gallows humor. I wanted to have something positive to say here, so I showed the precipitation as a percentage of average. And you'll see that in the upper Rio Grande, we're at 289% of average precipitation. Well, that's because this is for the water year 2006, and that began October 1st. And the average for this day is very close to 0. And if you have any precipitation at all and you divide by something very close to 0, you get an astronomical number like 289%, which is why there's an asterisk there. it's really not saying anything yet. Our seasonal precipitation outlook is, I sound like a broken record, warmer than normal and drier than normal. And the one thing, positive you might look at and say is that at least the very upper part of the Rio Grande is in equal chances. Keep in mind that if we get average snowpack, we get significantly less than average runoff, particularly down into Elephant Butte. And the fact that it's going to be warmer would suggest that that's going to continue. The drought monitor improved slightly this is sort of a snapshot from last Thursday. You'll see that the entire Rio Grande remains in some level of drought, from abnormally dry to severe drought. The more worrisome chart is this one, which is the seasonal outlook. And this has gotten worse from last month. All this yellow last month was white. So they are forecasting that during the remainder of this year, pretty much all of Texas is going to be in drought. And certainly the persistence in the lower Rio Grande, that's the one thing we have a general consensus on. El Nino has been, or I shouldn't say El Nino, ENSO is still neutral. That is, we are not in El Nino or La Nina conditions. If you look at the sea surface temperatures across the eastern equatorial Pacific, you'll see that they're hovering right around average, generally slightly on the below average side. And we've got a very high likelihood that we'll have La Nina developing in the immediate future during the rest of this year. La Nina is favored. It's still 54% to continue December through February, which is really getting into the thick part of our snow season. So that's leading to the generally drier conditions you're seeing in the forecast. So in conclusion, this is looking more and more like a critically short year. By the way, on my picture there, notice the photographer, Deion Sanders. This is the settlement picture taken at the end of the special master hearing in Philadelphia last Wednesday. If you haven't heard the story of how this picture was acquired, ask DL about it. 2026 is really, this is where, make no doubt about it, I'm sounding the alarm here. We're looking like a really critically short supply year, and we have less and less time for miracles to happen. We've got that low project storage you saw, which, it's kind of almost gotten inevitable these days. We've got low, dry, warm forecast, making 2026 look like a very rough year. In addition to the current conditions, keep in mind that Caballo had a release of only about 248,000 acre feet. This is the 7th lowest release in the history of Caballo Dam. And we only had a 6-inch allotment, which when we have these very, very dry years, is indicated both by EBID's allotment and the prior year's release from Caballo. We certainly have a hangover the next year, as the pumping that went in to offset the effect of the short surface water supply affects the surface water supply in the following year. To give you some context, the lowest annual release in project history was about 169,000 acre feet back in 2013. Now we've got about what did I say, 86,000 acre feet in project storage right now? Yeah, 86,000 acre feet in project storage right now. On this day in 2012, before that, the year before that 2013 season, at this point, we were sitting on about 119,000 acre feet. So this is definitely looking grim, not much in hand, not much sign that there's much on the way. And as I pointed out, this current level is below of actual releasable water is below the D1 and D2 zeros. So that's where we are today. It is my recommendation that we start discussions with our partners in the project, EP number 1, Reclamation, and IBWC, to start discussing what our various response scenarios are to what's shaking out to be a pretty rough year. I think those discussions should probably start in committee with the board members, and then reach out to our partners in all of this. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. King. Question for Dr. King. Questions for Dr. King?
Does he know how to whistle any other tunes?
You know, I'm pretty well forgotten.
In a while. Other questions for Dr. King? Dr. King, I appreciate the outlook, particularly the context between current conditions in 2012. Well, we still have 40,000, between 40 and 50,000 acre feet of water to catch up to be where we were in 2012. It was pretty dismal. I will initiate work with the Water Resources Committee to start discussions of how we will make a determination to release this in the upcoming year, coordinated with our sister district, with the very real potential of not having a release. Anything else from the board? Hearing nothing, that moves us to item 13, the manager's update. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, we were in Philadelphia last week. I had the opportunity to attend the hearing with President Davier, Board Member Bolquist, our consultants, and it was an uneventful, momentous occasion. The settlement was presented to the judge. The only burning question that he had was wanted to know from Ryan Serrano what a water master was. I don't recall him asking any other witness a question. So
UTEP.
Oh yeah, UTEP. He has taken up the settlement. They'll consider the 2 decrees. I assume that they're starting on that sometime in November, and we should have a report from the special master sometime in the spring. We also had the opportunity to do some sightseeing in the birthplace of our nation, and that was fun. I enjoyed that. We this week have finalized both the capital and special agreements with the ISC for our dam and drain maintenance crews. We have Leah hard at work finalizing the purchase of equipment. I believe we've staffed every position on our dam and drain maintenance crews except 2. We are in the process of either moving current employees into equipment operator positions and then backfilling, or we're gonna open those up. And we do have, I think, 3 positions that we have moved EBID employees from current positions into the dam and drain maintenance crews, and Delise is in the process of backfilling those positions as well. Due to the flooding that happened in Votto, we've been working with FEMA on a damage inventory of the FEMA process to recoup some of our costs incurred in repairing and fixing the mesquite drain and whatever work that was required as a result of that flooding. We're currently in construction mode. We have several projects coming up. The city of Las Cruces piping project is one of them. We have, I believe, reached an agreement with them, and we're gonna go ahead and provide that construction service to the city. They're gonna pay us to put that pipe in, so. We're gonna begin work hopefully on Rincon Phase 1 in the near future. Still waiting on SHPO as far as that goes. And then other just construction projects that have arisen in the off season. We're working on a contracts database, so all of the contracts that the district has, all of the memorandums of agreement we'll use. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but rather than having them scattered and not clear where those are located, we are compiling a database that James and Joe have been working on. So all of our MOUs will be listed, linked to the document with expiration dates, so that we will be notified when we have MOUs or contracts. Any document that we're a party to, will be notified when those need to be renewed, terminated, whatever the case may be. And we have been using stormwater. James Narvaez is unfortunately out sick this week, but he's been compiling that data and has a report that he will present to the board, hopefully at the November meeting, if not the December meeting, where that stormwater has gone. And that's a topic we need to talk about as a board. We can't predict stormwater, so we use it as best as possible, but there is no policy on the books about who gets water, where that water goes. It's kind of a fly by the seat of your pants situation. So I think that's something that we, at least the Water Resources Committee, might want to take up and look at, so that we have some direction in the future. And that's all I have for my report, my update. I'll move to the calendar of events.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Smith on the manager's report?
Just comment that I do appreciate their efforts to capture that stormwater and put it back in our.
Thank you,
I'd
Director.
love to do a good job.
Thank you, Special Director Colquitt.
How did, and this might be a question for Gary, or how did is it the 10,000 lakes or the Diez Lagos, 10,000 lakes, whatever, how did that do? With all this rain, did we capture water there?
Capture water at Diez Lagos?
Well, no, not Diez Lagos, well, what's it called, Gary,
Yeah, it's,
Interesting.
yes, Lagos at the tail end of the west drain.
Uh-huh,
What happened there was just, it collects drain water.
okay,
And I don't believe that, we had an impact of any sort of flooding and whatever bottleneck right there, it's captured there.
okay.
But I don't think anything else, happened other than it worked.
Oh, no, but it did work, it captured good amount. Yeah. No other questions?
Thank you, Director Colquitt. Thank you, Mr. Ettinger. Other questions for Mr. Smith for manager's update? Hearing none, calendar of events, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. October 21st through the 23rd here at the New Mexico Farm and Ranch Heritage Museum is annual WRRI Water Conference. If you have the opportunity to attend, they have some excellent panels. It's I attended the event last year. Thought it was a good experience. I'm planning on attending hopefully the second and third days this year. I believe you're speaking.
I have not heard back from the other two presenters, but my expectation is that we will do the same presentation we gave to the Water Alliance, we're going to give to Weary on Texas v. New Mexico.
And I believe Director Roby Gross has been invited to speak on the need for water research. So that is October 21st and through the 23rd. If you want to attend, registration is open. I believe we've registered everyone that expressed an interest in going. The next item on the calendar is the Family Farm Alliance Annual Meeting, October 30th through the 31st in Reno. I know the board approved, I believe, one staff member attending. Unfortunately, we do not have any staff available to attend that. A reminder to the directors who are up for re-election. Your election petitions are due October 31st, 2025 by close of business. Is it close of business?
Yes.
Please get those in.
Get them in.
No, please, just get them in. The NWRA Annual Conference and Leadership Forum will be November 5th through the 7th in Tucson. I believe Director Roby Rosa, President Davier, and myself will be attending. There is a tour and leadership forum in Yuma the day before that we will not be attending. So we will be there for that conference presenting on the Texas versus New Mexico. So the next board meeting will be November 12th. Let's put it on your calendars. And the election date is December 2nd.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Have we taken action to move our December board meeting to our canvas date? So, Mr. Smith, Madam Secretary, you can help, and me as well. We need to put that on our agenda for the November board meeting. So the canvass of the election happens on Monday. Our regular scheduled board meeting is Wednesday. Well, I don't know how many candidates we're going to have. Without candidates, there's not a lot of incentive for our members to show up and vote. I'm hoping that we will have candidates, multiple candidates for every precinct. If we do, it takes all day to canvass the vote. And so we really need a second day for a board meeting anyways. If we don't, the canvassing takes an hour or so. And then we just have our regular board meeting as opposed to calling you back twice. So I need the board of directors to consider whether or not we're going to have a Monday and a Wednesday meeting to cover the canvas and the board meeting, or whether we're going to move our board meeting to the canvas date with the very real possibility that we will recess and reconvene the following Tuesday to complete our business. If you would please be considering that, we will be discussing that at the November board meeting. Any questions on the calendar of events? Hearing none, that brings us to general and administrative. Mrs. Byron. Ms. Byron, the first thing I want to do is acknowledge my appreciation for your years of service to the district. I understand your retirement is just around the corner.
It's coming up soon. Yes, thank you.
So congratulations on your retirement, and, you know, on behalf of the district, our gratitude for all of your service.
Thank you.
Bye.
Helps to be able to see. Let's see. That big enough? For your cash flow for this month, it was a very routine month, not much out of the ordinary occurred. We did get auction proceeds of, about 25,000 so far, and we got one lump payment, for a number of right of use fees. The interest rate at the time was about 4.35%. It's now gone down to about 4.27, so it hasn't dropped a lot in September. I presume it's gonna drop more. coming up. We still are in the positive as far as acquiring reserves. And that is my report.
Questions for Mrs. Byram on our statement of cash flows? I want to continue to mention my appreciation to the district for their efforts in constraining spending in a difficult time. The fact that we are continuing to grow the cash reserves for the district is a testament to the efforts of the staff of our district to do more with less. Our members are also having to figure out how to do that as well, and being part of that solution is greatly appreciated by myself, and I suspect the members of our district. Thank you. Hearing no other questions, that brings us to the approval of Resolution 2025-13, disposition of obsolete, worn out, or unusable tangible personal property.
Yes, I do not have a copy of the resolution right this minute.
We have it in our board packet.
Yes, but this is part 3 of the assets that staff, particularly the maintenance staff, has developed for equipment that is worn out and obsolete. We have done fairly well with our auction results for the other 2 approved lists. We have expecting about 70,000 for what we've sold so far. The amount on this next set of lists comes out to around 150,000. We typically make less than that because the amounts that we put on there are the estimated market values from the Kelly Blue Books, and they tend to be more than we get because it's an auction and people could stop earlier. I stand available for questions.
Are there questions on Resolution 2025-13? Just a comment, again, I appreciate the district working to dispose of these assets before they turn into trash. I know that's a problem that I have in my own operation. Hold on, take too long. Wait until they're worthless. So. What is the will of the board?
I'll make I'd like to make a motion to pass resolution 2025-13.
I have a motion for Director Colquitt to approve Resolution 2025-13. Second. Seconded by Director Rosa. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Byron. That brings us to engineering and maintenance update. I do not see Mr. Barrett or Mr. Yo.
No, please at this time.
Brings us to item 17, the HR safety update. Have that update in our board packet. Mr. Smith, Ms. Montiel.
I will go ahead and give the HR report. We currently have 83 employees. The current openings are for a ditch rider in the north and 2 ditch riders in the south. I believe they're currently interviewing for both of those positions. Yep, upcoming retirement here in the next month. So that's all we have.
Thank you very much. Questions on the HR update? Hearing none, that brings us to item 18, the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which any board member would like to have pulled and acted on separately? Hearing none, what is the will of the board? President will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion from Director Chris to approve the consent agenda, seconded by Director Colquitt. Any discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. The consent agenda is approved. That brings us to the suspension and transfer hearing. I will be recusing myself for this hearing, which leaves exactly a quorum of the board to take action. Director Rosa.
Thank you, Mr. President. So let me get to the page where. That's correct. Okay, I call to order the board to hear is applications for suspension and transfer. The board convened to act upon applications by landowners in the district to transfer water rights pertinent to lands within the district which are not suitable for irrigation or capable of being properly irrigated to other lands within the district. These applications are filed under section 73-13-4 of the New Mexico statutes. This board will decide if, within their judgment, the other lands within the district may be profitably and advantageously irrigated. The applicants are identified as listed on Exhibit A. The applicants were required to publish notice in any newspaper published within Diana County of EBID taking action to consider a resolution allowing the transfer. The publication should have listed the time and place of this meeting, listed the action to be taken by this board, listed a description of the move to and move from lands, and listed the reason for the requested transfer. Does staff have a copy of the notice of publication?
Yes, sir, we do.
Were all the required points in the publication?
Yes, sir.
Was the last publication date made prior to this year?
Yes, sir, it was.
We will now proceed with presentation by staff. After that, the board members can ask questions of the staff.
Good morning. We have two water right transfers and delinquent suspensions. The first one we have is 2025 WTS. TBC Properties LLC is transferring a combined total of 7 water righted acres to AAA Farms LLC. If approved, TBC Properties LLC will no longer have water rights, and AAA Farms will have a new total of 40.62 water righted acres. Second one we have is 2025 WTS 010. Michael and Karen Brockman's transferring 4.62 water righted acres to Davier Farms LLC. If approved, Mr. and Mrs. Brockman will no longer have water rights, and Davier Farms LLC will have a new total of 270.46 water righted acres. The third one we have are the delinquent suspensions. There are 45 with a combined total of 43.20 to suspend. Staff recommends approval on all.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Are there any questions from the board? Staff. Hearing none. At this point in time, the board will take evidence and testimony from the applicants or their representatives, or any persons who are here to protest the application. Are any of the applicants present online? Any protestants? Okay, does the EBID board have, seeing that no applicants are present, the board cannot ask them questions, would. Are there any other comments? Okay, the chair will now entertain a motion to have a resolution to approve or disapprove the applications.
I'll make a motion to approve said application.
Okay, I have a motion to approve resolution 2025 S&T 10. Second, but I have a motion by Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Chris. And all those in favor? Aye. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is the opinion of the chair that ayes have it and the motion passes. Mr. Lewis, do I need to dismiss the board for hearing suspension for practice?
I think you need to adjourn. Yeah, you need to adjourn the suspension and transfer hearing so that you're back into your regular working.
I adjourn the board. Do I need a motion for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You right here, I make motion to adjourn the board from the suspension hearing and transfer it.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's the opinion of the chair that the ayes have it and the board sitting in suspensions and transfers is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Director Rosa. Please note for the record that my vote was either not present or abstained. Are there any other items of open session business which need to be discussed? Hearing none, we have agenda closed session items. I will accept a motion to go into closed session.
Motion so made.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Rosa to go into closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being present, the ayes have it. We are in closed session. Madam Secretary, please pause the recording.
It's fun.
With no other closed session business to discuss, I will accept a motion to come out of closed session.
Motion so made.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt to come out of closed session. Seconded by Director Ludwig. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it. The motion passed unanimously. We're in open session. I will note for the record that no items were discussed in closed session other than those addressed in the motion to go into closed session, which were the items listed on the agenda. Is there any other open session business?
Mr. Chairman,
Dr.
I would just add on to my my water update, the slug of water that's coming down the river right now. Interestingly, that came out of Rio Puerco. I just saw that 3,400 CFS at peak coming out of Rio Puerco, which means there's going to be a whole lot of sediment in that river reach.
It's like sandy and gravelly. It's that shitty creek above Socorro. I mean, it just looks like just a gravel pit, right, Dr. King?
Well, it's got a pretty extensive watershed. It goes up a long ways, and in the 1800s, it was actually a perennial stream.
Oh, is that right?
But
Thank you,
it's,
Director Colquitt, for that vivid
it's-
description.
yeah. Anyhow, that'll hopefully a lot of the water and not much of the sediment makes its way down to Elephant Butte.
So thank you. So I'm not familiar with that. Is that from that east or west of the river?
Ah,
It's on the west side.
Okay,
Do you know Rio Salado?
I know
Rio
it in
Salado and
Arizona.
Rio Salado and Rio Puerco are right next to, they're very close together. They're just north of Socorro.
Okay, thank you.
That watershed of the Echo reaches beyond the Interstate 40, which goes, of course, toward.
Wow,
It's a big watershed.
okay. Is it still flowing?
Oh, yeah.
Is it, say again?
Let me see what it is right now. It's come down quite a bit. It's down about 450 right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kane.
That's Rio Puerco.
Okay. Are there any other items of open session business? Hearing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion so made. Second.
I have a motion from Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Roby Rosa to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passed unanimously. It is 12:30 on October 8th, and we are adjourned.